Oklahoma has owned the Big 12 Conference for the past going on 20 years. And Ohio State's owned the Big 10 for about 20 years. But nobody has owned a conference in the past 10 years like the Clemson Tigers. Every ACC championship going back to 2015 has belonged to Clemson, except for 2 years ago when Pitt and Wake Forest met in the ACC championship game. Welcome to the Voice of College Football and our ACC predictions for 2023. How about that? Aren't you pumped? We have left the link to join the show in the comments section, in the chat, the live chat there. So please join us here at the Voice of College Football. All right, we have brought in our set designer who has rearranged everything. It took about 4 hours to redesign the set to give it the full ACC decor. So we hope you appreciate that. Again, join the show. Leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. We've got the full array of ACC channels with us: Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, and Clemson. And, of course, here on the national channel as well. My name is Mark. If you're joining us for the first time and you love college football, where have you been? We talk college football every day, 24/7, 365, and we not only do it on one channel, we do it on 15 channels. And so regardless of what team you love, what conference you're involved in, what you want to hear, we deliver. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. It's our aim, our goal, our mission to be the very best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Do we do that every day? No, we don't. That's the aim, the goal, the mission. We continue to get better and strive to be better each and every day. We do have a call coming in, so maybe we just go to the phone lines before we unveil our ACC predictions. How about that? We could do that. All right, so welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Holden.
Holden, what's going on?
How you doing, Mark?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I was calling in. I'm a Wake Forest fan, so I thought I'd call in, see what you're thinking about my Demon Deacons this upcoming season.
Well, I think that you've got a quarterback situation, obviously, that's minus Sam Hartman. And your backup quarterback, of course, has experience, Griffiths. You lost, can't think of his name, the wide receiver that just went down
Perry,
for the
yes,
season. Oh, was it A.T. Perry?
Oh, you're thinking Donovan Green. Yes, sir.
Yes, Donovan Green. Yes. I didn't think it was A.T. Perry.
I thought you were thinking like players we lost from last year. That's my fault.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that went down during training camp. And in addition to that, I think that you had one of the top, I would say that you had one of the top 5 to 10 wide receiver cores in the nation last year at minimum. And so that's been somewhat decimated. And I never underestimate Dave Clawson because I think he is one of the very finest coaches in college football.
I would agree with that. I can give you the sort of quick rundown here. So
yes, give me the rundown on Wake. I got to say that I really wanted to do a deep dive on the ACC today, but I had so much going, I really didn't get to it like I did with the Pac-12 yesterday. So I have not really done my homework on the ACC other than what I typically do from day to day.
Oh, yeah, I got you, Mark. All right, so quarterback, it's Mitch Griffiths. Like you said, he has the experience from the VMI game last year. He looked fine in that game, but of course it's VMI, so nobody, a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of backup Power 5 quarterbacks probably look fine against VMI. From what I know, there's not really anything to be worried about there. I think he's at least an average level quarterback among the ACC. At least probably going to sit around average, maybe up to about the 5th best, I would say, this year. He's do you remember John Wofford?
Oh, yeah.
He's very similar in style to how John Wofford plays. He'll make, unlike Hartman. Hartman loves, the deep ball. Hartman's a very good thrower. Griffiths will use his legs a lot. He'll take the check down, the short, the intermediate passes, and he's more of an equal opportunity guy. Hartman is very focused on receivers and deep balls. Griffiths, he'll take the check downs, he'll take the short throws to the tight ends, but he'll also take those shots when they're there. And then running back, it's Justice Ellison. It's the first year where Wake is going to have one guy who's probably going to get over half the carries for the team. That's sort of like you remember Kenneth Walker transferring. That's sort of why he left Wake.
Sure.
Because he couldn't get, because Wake doesn't run it that way. They don't give a running back 70% of the carries. So Ellison will get 50, maybe 55, 60% of the carries. The receiver room, I'm not worried about the receiver room. Under Clausen, with Kevin Higgins, with the offensive coordinator, I've just never been worried about the receiver room at Wake for maybe 5 years or so now. It's Taylor Marin, it's Key Williams, it's Walker Merrill. There's just a lot of guys, and even some freshmen that are probably ready to play if needed, but are probably going to sit back there as sort of the fifth, sixth receiver. And even those guys could still be solid contributors.
So this is really good stuff here, because I'll start with your take on John Wofford. So what I remember about John Wofford is he was in that transition phase that took Wake from being one of the worst offenses, one of the most anemic offenses in college football, to suddenly, bam, we're throwing 35, 40 touchdown passes, and we've got this elite offense that put up 50 points against Texas A&M in a bowl game, and John Wofford was there. He just kind of went through this huge transformation from one season to the next.
Exactly. Yep. You had when Clausen first got the job, the team was 3-9 back-to-back years. The whole team was the defense. Basically, it was Mike Elko. He was the defensive coordinator at the time. His defense was the only reason that Wake stayed in games. You think of the 0-0 Wake Virginia Tech game that went to overtime.
Yeah.
Games like that. That's the only games Wake could win.
The 3-0 game against Boston College.
Exactly. And then you got to sort of that transition. Wofford's quarterback, he's junior to senior. He's an upperclassman now. He's sort of getting to the point where he's leading an offense that is about ACC average, starting to grow. And then by the time you reach, I think it's about the time that Jamie Newman is the quarterback, that Wake really reached that level where they're scoring, 30, 35 points a game. They're playing in shootouts. And then that switches obviously into Hartman for his, I think, 3 seasons. And then now it's going to switch on to Griffiths. And my whole idea, sort of, the offense is not what Wake is going to be worried about this year. And then there's a lot of continuity with this team in general this year to next season, at least expected continuity. So it's not going to be the concern now, and I wouldn't expect it to be a concern in the future. This team is still going to score 30, 35 points a game. They're still going to be high scoring. It's about whether the defense can take a step forward while the offense doesn't take a full step back. But obviously, when you're missing a guy like Hartman, a guy like A.T. Perry, the offensive line was shaky last year, and you're just hoping it's a little bit better this year. You didn't lose a lot of guys from last year, but without Perry, without Donovan Green, without Sam Hartman, that passing attack still should be good. You want the running attack to be a little better, and the offense shouldn't take a full step back. It should just slide back a little bit, and you're hoping the defense is sort of what's going to push forward to make up for that.
Okay, so that's really good stuff, because my initial thought when Sam Hartman had the medical scare at the beginning of last season was not that he was necessarily the best quarterback in the country, but he might be the most valuable one, because the Wake had been so reliant on the downfield passing game. And we'll never know what would have happened minus Sam Hartman, but we do this year. And so I kind of backed off on Wake Forest a little bit. They were just a 7-5 team in the regular season, so I guess I'm not backing off on my prediction too much in regards to their final record. I see that despite the defensive lapses last year, you do bring back 5 of your top 7 tacklers, although your top tackler, Ryan Smeta, 117 stops, is gone. And
Yes.
So do you have hopes that the defense will be better with experience coming back?
Yeah, let me just say one last thing about the offense, and then I get into that. Just to reiterate on the receiver room,
Yes.
Again, like I said, it's going to be more equal opportunity because not only because that's how Griffiths works, but now that Green is down, Taylor Morin, he's 6 foot, 6'1". He's more of a true slot guy. He's more operational in the slot, but he can work on the outside, and that's where he's going to get pushed to a little bit for this year with Jaquez Williams more working out of the slot there. He's going to sort of, or sorry, not Jaquez, Keyshawn Williams is going to take more of the time in the slot there. And then Morin is going to be pushed a bit more outside. He's not really a jump ball receiver either. The guy that's going to be the jump ball receiver, I don't know if you remember this guy from last year, Jamal Banks.
Yep.
He was sort of a breakout guy last year, and he, I believe, was very nearly preseason All ACC this year. I know like the Wake Rider that I follow, he had him, Tez Walker, UNC obviously didn't get that, what's the word? He didn't get the exception to play, the waiver to play, which
Yep.
is, whatever. I don't want to get you into that argument right now. I don't know what your take on that is, but I won't get you into that now because I know a lot of people have opinions on that. But it's sort of Jamal Banks, your deep threat, Morin and Williams are sort of your two other guys who can sort of work better in space and are sort of more sure-handed, shorter routes guys. And then so to move to the defense like you wanted to, defensive end, Wake has it's Kendron Wayman on one side, and then on the other side, give me just a second, I'm blanking here. I believe it is the other side is sort of the main for the defensive end. I'm blanking. I'm sorry. It's two guys returning on the defensive end that you're sort of comfortable with.
Yeah, I see Jasheen Davis.
Yes, Jasheen Davis. He's the other guy. He is sort of the main guy in the defensive end. He's the one that is going to start every day. And I've heard that Kendron Wayman is likely to start, not 100%, but he is likely expected to start. Defensive tackle, that is the big question mark you're going to be asking. That's the big question mark I have, Wake Riders have. It is, give me just a moment. I am really blanking right now on names. But there's one guy, a defensive tackle, but Wake runs normally a 4-down. More
Kevin
often.
Pointer?
Yes, Kevin Pointer, the main guy. Sorry, you probably got the roster in front of you. I don't here.
I just pulled
and
it
then
up.
it's Nick Helbig, Bryce Ganius, and one other guy. Helbig and Ganius are both transfers into Wake.
Isaiah Chaney?
I believe it. Yes, I believe it might be Chaney. All three of those guys kind of battling for that second spot. All three, especially Helbig and Ganius, both missed spring ball. They both were out during spring ball. So they have gotten big time first team reps sort of over the past week of fall camp. And that's been important for them, kind of trying to get them to that point where they are players you are comfortable with starting for you, running against other ones, and sort of working for you in the main time rather than it just being you just have to put one of the guys in there because you have to have two guys on the field. Linebacker, it is the best Wake linebacker room in 5-10 years, in a long, long time. It is one of the best Wake linebacker rooms that Wake Riders and people around Wake remember because it is good at the top. It is good with depth. There are 5 to 6 playable linebackers, and they are all good linebackers. Most of them returning, and most of them guys you're comfortable with back there. Same case is in the secondary, especially specifically that safety room. That safety room is Malik Mustafa, who's basically an all ACC level guy. Shaylin Garnes, who's really good, among other guys who are back there. Again, it's about 4 or 5 deep safety room for just 2 spots there, and you feel very comfortable with what you're getting in the safeties. Cornerback, you like the starters. I've heard they've looked good in fall camp, the cornerbacks in general. You like the starters. You question the depth there. If guys start going down at cornerback, this happened last year. Kalen Carson went down against Vandy. He missed, I believe, the rest of the season. One other guy went down at one point. I can't remember who it was. And Wake was down to a cornerback room that at the end of the season, it was maybe the reason Wake was losing games against UNC, the game against Duke, the game against NC State. Even you just couldn't get stops. You couldn't get off the field on third down because they could go 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9, 3rd and short. They could just target your cornerbacks, the week 1 or the week 2 that are on the field that aren't really starters, and they just go to those guys. And then, like I said, safety are really good. Cornerback depth is the question. Linebackers, really good. Defensive end, solid. And defensive tackle, all the way from 2 your second tackle and your depth are both questions there.
Sweet. We got the big rundown on Wake Forest, a lot more than I knew. Even though, I've looked at it a few times, but not recently. And again, the big injury to your wide receiver.
Yes, sir. Donovan Green. Yep.
Donovan Green went down. He got 37 balls last year, was second on the team in yardage, 6 touchdowns. A.T. Perry, of course, on to the NFL. And so you're not as concerned as everybody else with Sam Hartman gone. You just think that it's going to be more of a controlled, short passing game.
Yeah, it's going to be much more of an even distribution passing game. Griffiths might not have quite the arm Hartman does. It was a little bit weird last year. I'm not sure if it's because of that scare Hartman had. Maybe he was a little bit scared to run, or maybe he was just, frankly, for 2 or 3 years, I watched Hartman. By the end of every season, he was limping around. Barely seemed like he could run if he wasn't actually playing. If he wasn't on the field, if he didn't need to be running, he would be off the field limping around, barely able to get around. I don't know if that happened last year too. I don't remember specifically seeing that, but he just kind of lost his legs last year. The years before that, he had been a guy who would scramble when he needed to. He could pick up even 40 yards if he had open space for him. But just last year, it was like he almost became one-dimensional in a way. Griffiths, he's not going to be like that. He is a guy who will go if there is space for him. He is even a little bit smaller than Hartman, I believe. And he will use his mobility, his athleticism, his shiftiness to get him out of sacks, to run out of the pocket, make plays, and then of course, like I said, he'll use the short passing game, the running back side of the backfield, the tight ends in their short routes, and he'll hit the intermediate and the deep routes when they're there for him. But he is not going to force things in that way, like forcing a deep ball he doesn't need to make. But I'm not saying, of course, he's a guy with not a lot of starts, just one. He will still make mistakes. He will still throw interceptions, but it is not typical of him to be a guy with a high number of interceptions, because he is not usually going to throw a ball that is not there or is not needed to be thrown if he doesn't have to.
Holden, we appreciate the scouting report. We appreciate you being here. We've probably given Wake Forest more of an in-depth scouting report than all the other outlets put together just now.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Mark.
Have you made a final prediction?
In my head, it is 8-4. In my heart, it is 9-3. I don't think that Clemson and Notre Dame game, those are just tough games to win on the road. Death Valley, South Bend. Nobody likes winning those games. It's really, it's just, nobody thinks Wake's going to win those games. I don't even. Florida State at home. Clausen has Mike Norvell's number all the way back to that bowl game Wake played Memphis in 2018. He's beaten Norvell. I believe it's now 4 games in a row. Wake's beaten Florida State 3 games in a row. So I know Florida State, top 10 preseason team. I don't even necessarily disagree with that idea. I think Florida State's a very talented team. Great transfer portal class they brought in. I'm sure you probably know more about Florida State football than me, to be honest. But I just, Wake, Clausen seems to have Norvell's number with schemes. We blew him out last year in Tallahassee. Obviously not the same team now. At the least, I would say that game would be close. And in my heart, that is the game that makes the difference from 8 to 9 wins. And then I think you just slip up one somewhere. One of the 50-50 games, Wake, the year we made the championship, 2021, won all the 50-50 games, basically.
Yep.
2022, last year, you lost them. You lost at State. You lost at Duke. You lost to UNC at home. 2 of those 3 games, I believe, I think Duke and UNC, maybe even NC State too, you had what? Sorry. You had the ball at the end of the game, and you just didn't convert. And that's so weird for the Wake offense, just not converting when you have the chance. So that's something that you hope comes back this year. And I still think you slip up once. Duke, NC State, Louisville, one of those games. I don't. It's Louisville. I can't even remember right now if Louisville's on the schedule. But Duke, State, one of those teams that are Pitt, one of those teams that are solid but not great. You maybe lose one of those, but I still like 8 wins, and I'd be very, very, very happy with 9 if you can win that Florida State game, or you just maybe lose Florida State, Notre Dame, Clemson, but don't slip up elsewhere.
Yeah, so it's harder to keep track of these schedules because it's not
the
split into
divisions.
two divisions. So you got to actually remember who they play.
We've got
So in
Georgia
terms
Tech,
of trip
Virginia
up
Tech,
games
Duke
for
every year.
Wake Forest, of course, they play at Clemson. That's an 85 or 90% certainty of a loss. Pitt at home is not going to be easy, followed by Florida State. They got a tough stretch with Pitt, Florida State, Duke, NC State, Notre Dame in consecutive weeks. So I'm not quite as hopeful as you are. However, I am a little bit more trusting of Dave Clawson than most people are. He's a great coach. He's one of the 10, 12 best coaches in America. And I'm a little bit more confident of the passing game, as you've convinced me that Sam Hartman's not going to be quite the loss that most people consider him to be. But Holden, we appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you, Mark. And anything that happens this year, it is building towards, I think, and a lot of the Wake Riders I hear from think is going to be a really, really good, almost, up towards that ACC contender level team in 2024. So this is sort of the year you're getting all those guys' experience. You're getting Griffiths, his experience for a 2024 team that should be really, really good, returning a lot of guys and just ready to compete in the ACC for a chance to reach the title.
Thanks, Holden. Appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you, Mark. You have a great stream, sir.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Bye.
All right. The take on Wake Forest. I love to hear anything that's not concerning Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. That is shoved down our throats, and Michigan all the time, all the time, all the time. Do I love to talk about those teams? Yes. They are going to be competing for a national championship. However, I did post a video the other day on spoiler teams that have no chance of winning a national championship, but could find themselves derailing one of those teams for a national championship. Let's get back to the ACC talk. And thus far, the quote of the night comes from Roger Dodger. I got Stanford winning the ACC. It's going to be the big game, right? Stanford Cal. That's going to be the game of the year in the ACC very soon. Wouldn't that be something? Check out our Stanford versus the ACC video and our Cal versus the ACC video. And if we don't have any calls coming in, we've got somebody who's trying to make it in, and we will get to that call as soon as they are able to connect. We will get to our predictions. Let's do that. Here we go, folks. Let's line it up. And before I show you the predictions, I'm going to have to explain something. Because the way we set up the week from a programming standpoint, we did the Pac-12 last night. So check it out. Pac-12 predictions last night. ACC tonight, Big 12 on Wednesday, SEC on Thursday, Big 10 on Friday. Then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to map it all out in terms of the college football playoff and what those selections are going to be, and actually the conference championship games, because this is our first example of needing to make some decisions on conference championship weekend. And you will see what I mean in just a second, because I've made this statement throughout the offseason that if there's one conference that has the most obvious, the most guaranteed conference championship game, it is the ACC. The Pac-12. The Pac-12 to me is the most competitive race in college football. The Big 12 is the most competitive from top to bottom, but the Pac-12 is the most competitive at the top with 4 or 5 teams. All right, so the most interesting race to me, at least as we start out, it could completely change, of course, but the projection of the best race is the Pac-12. The most competitive conference top to bottom, the Big 12. The SEC is a decision between Alabama and LSU, it seems, in the West against Georgia. The Big 10, the decision to be made between Ohio State, Michigan, possibly Penn State, and then a possibly wide open Big 10 Western Division. And the ACC just seemed to be, well, if anybody in their right mind is going to pick against Clemson and Florida State, they're not in their right minds. We shall see. So this was the conference that I said, well, if there was a championship game that was the most likely to take place. It is Florida State and Clemson. Well, we may have to size up these standings and see how this is going to play out, folks. Here we go at the bottom of the conference. Duke impresses me so much. We talked about their matchup with Clemson. Please check out the videos we posted on the Clemson channel with Duke. Riley Leonard's back at quarterback. He accounted for like 33 touchdowns last year. And also keep in mind, Mike Elko, that was his first head coaching exposure in the Power Five or really anywhere above high school. And he was phenomenal. And Duke, I've never seen this before. They bring back every reception and every yard on the ground. Every rushing yard, every reception, Duke brings back. Phenomenal. 18 starters back for Duke. And of course, they get Clemson in the opener at home. That should be fascinating as a 13-point underdog. And of course, we've got our predictions for week one. They'll be coming up here soon. We just got the big rundown from Holden on Wake Forest. My goodness. We should clip that and post it somewhere to our Wake Forest channel, wherever that floats off in the ether. Syracuse coming off that remarkable run to 6-0, and then they faltered down the stretch. Garrett Schrader at quarterback, and we will see if Syracuse can make bowl eligibility here again in the ACC. And we've got them making it to a bowl. Not Virginia Tech, though. And certainly Brent Pry's got his work cut out for him. He has inherited the worst Virginia Tech roster since going back to the beginning of the Frank Beamer era. They're the worst in the conference at quarterback play, worst passing attack, 5-7 for Virginia Tech. And we will dive into schedules here as we take your calls. And you see the bottom half of the league. Let's get to the top half. And this is where it gets interesting. To me, it's Clemson. And I did have to think long and hard about this, differentiating Clemson and Florida State. The game's in Death Valley, of course, between the two in October. They play early in the season. There is a lot of thought out there that Florida State loses at Clemson, then comes back and wins the ACC championship game rematch. Let's not be so quick to believe that it's automatically going to be Clemson and Florida State, because I do believe that Florida State's got another loss in them somewhere, most likely at Heinz Field against Pitt or whatever they call that stadium these days in Pittsburgh. Pitt, I like to go through the conference schedule. It's a light conference schedule for Pitt. Give Pitt a lot of credit outside the conference, and I believe we've got Talk is Pitt here in the chat tonight. We've got Cincinnati, West Virginia, and Notre Dame. So give Pitt a lot of credit for scheduling difficult non-conference. Remember, this is the team that took one of the 6 or 7 best teams in the country, Tennessee, to overtime at home last year. One of the best pass rushing teams in the country. Of course, they've got one of the great defensive line coaches in the country, and Charlie Partridge at Pitt. Got a top-flight defense. I would love to see Phil Jurkovec stay healthy for an entire season, folks. And I like Pitt to go 9-3. I do think that they've got a real shot to go to Notre Dame and win that game. Of course, that does not impact the conference race. But I also, even though not a whole lot of people are high on NC State, Brennan Armstrong comes in from Virginia. Much of this rides on him, of course, being the Brennan Armstrong of 2021. 31 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, led the nation in passing yardage, and not the Brennan Armstrong of 2022. NC State always produces, and they've developed and done a tremendous job at the offensive line position, first rounders the last few years. And the defense gave up 19 points per game last year, and one of the top 20 or 25 yardage totals in the country. So NC State, I believe, is going to have top-level defense, and they've got a quarterback who needs to get his head on straight, and he might be at the right place to get that done. So NC State's an intriguing team to me, maybe the most interesting team in the conference. Maybe Miami would be, but I talk Miami football every Wednesday night with Cam Underwood on our Miami show, so they're not as quite as much of a mystery to me because I hear about their personnel every week. But Miami, of course, only 5-7 last year, and to look at Miami's 5-7 and compare that to Texas A&M's 5-7, it's not even close. They were horrible. Miami was horrendous last year. So maybe I'm putting a little bit too much faith in Miami turning it around. But Mario Cristobal, of course, had a nice run at Oregon. I do think he's a capable coach. Do I think he's a great coach? No, he has not proven to be a great coach. He's a good coach. He's a great recruiter. He's a good coach. He put together an all-star coaching staff last year, and it just didn't work out. They were awful, and they didn't coach them up, and they didn't prepare the team, and they were one of the worst prepared teams in all of college football last year. So maybe I'm stretching on Miami, but I do think that the schedule's light. They lose to Texas A&M out of conference, and they go 5-3 in conference. Same record as North Carolina. I know most people like them as a default if Florida State or Clemson don't make the championship game to get in there. But I don't think, again, even the offense that was near prolific last year beat up on a lot of bad competition, and down the stretch couldn't get the ball in the end zone against the likes of Georgia Tech, nor against Clemson with 10 points in the ACC championship game. North Carolina's a bit overrated nationally, in my perspective. I think that typically happens when you've got a name brand coach, when you've got a quarterback vying for a Heisman Trophy who accounted for like 43 touchdowns or 45 touchdowns last year. And there we see Louisville with Scott Satterfield, of course, off to Cincinnati. Jeff Brom, I believe, is an underrated coach by many. He did a remarkable job at Purdue, lifted them from a team that was winning 20 or 25% of its games in the Big Ten, if that, to a team that was going to bowl games on a regular basis and finally won the Western Division Championship its final season there. So Louisville, Jack Plummer comes in from the West Coast. Of course, he's being reunited with our guy, Jeff Brom, who coached Plummer at Purdue. And Jack Plummer actually at times beat out Aiden O'Connell for the starting job at Purdue. So don't overlook Louisville as a possible team that nobody would want to play the final month of the season. Jeff Brom has that magic that he brought from Purdue in defeating top 5 and 10 teams in the country. All right, we will head back to the lines right here at the Voice of College Football. I guess, no, we won't. We did have a couple of calls. There we go. We've got a call coming in from our old buddy, DeAndre, checking in.
Hey, Mark, man, I missed you.
Hey, Dre, what's going on? You missed me. We've missed you.
Yeah. How you been, man?
I've been fine. How have you been?
I've been great.
Good.
I'm glad to see somebody talk about NC State. I think NC State's going to surprise some people this year. Hopefully, it's
well,
not
I got them tied for second place.
Right. Brandon Armstrong is a good pickup for them, and I think they're going to have a fun year. I can't go through their roster in my head right now, but I think they're going to be pretty good. I think the reason why everybody's high on North Carolina has beaten Clemson out of some of the best defensive tackles, the defensive end positions, along with having May there. I think that's why a lot of people are high on them. I think they think, is it Chezik? Gene Chizik? Is that him?
Gene Chizik.
The old Auburn coaches.
Yep.
Yeah, I think they think that he's going to get that defense together a second year. I mean, these guys was highly touted, so I think they're going to get them together. I don't know who Carolina got at wide receiver, but I think that's what they're looking at. Why people are high on Carolina. Honestly, I know I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this. I don't really know Florida State roster that well outside of the defensive end and the quarterback. I think Florida State's kind of overrated. I'm not trying to be funny. Not because that game against Clemson, they came back towards the end. I guess Clemson just stopped playing and made it like close. And then they beat a 6-6 Oklahoma team. I really don't think they I don't really think they're as good as people think they are.
On a last-second field goal.
Yeah. So I think they're kind of overrated. I think NC State's by far the second best team behind
Wow,
Clemson.
you think they're definitely better than Florida State? Well, I'll say this about Florida State, and we know we've got a lot of Florida State fans here, and we appreciate you. And we've got Florida State Talk every Wednesday night, folks. So join us on the FSU channel at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. I wrestle with Florida State because, kind of like you, their 6 consecutive wins to finish the season last year, to me, was impressive. They won the games that they weren't winning the previous 4 or 5 years. Yes. But nobody was really that good. Florida and Oklahoma were the 2 best teams that they played the back half of the season. And when they played Wake, NC State, and Clemson in the middle, they lost all 3 games. They do have a ton of production and experience coming back. And they do have one of the better quarterbacks in the country coming back. And Jared Verse at defensive end is just a monster. And Fabian Levette, their nose tackle, is one of the best run enforcers in college football. So Keon Coleman was a big pickup. He caught 60 balls at Michigan State last year to put him together with Johnny Wilson. They've got a really good running back tandem, of course.
Right. Well, it sounds like they're pretty good, but we'll see. I just don't trust their coach, and I just don't trust their quarterback either. I know that he's highly. I don't think he had one good year. We've seen 1 year wonders before. I mean, hey, we all love DJ after that first game against Notre Dame.
Yeah, but that was a game.
That was a big upset.
Dre, that was one game.
I understand.
Jordan Travis did it for a full season. And the thing about Jordan Travis, too, it's been a full season that he turned in that was remarkable. It was a great season. And he's also built up to that, Dre. He was awful in 2019, 2020. And then he got better, and then he got better. And then, so he's been building to this. He's been steadily improving and getting better and working on his skill set.
Right. What worries about Clemson to me is the defensive line going to live up to expectation. And I'm also looking at that left tackle position. I think, I'm not saying nobody thinks Dabo's on the chopping block or nothing, but I think Dabo's going to have to be in a prove-it mode this year. He had 2 quarterbacks that were great players and run the defensive lineman, but the development of the offensive line has been terrible at Clemson, and I want to see more development. I watched Jackson Carman play the other day for the Bengals.
Yep.
I don't know how much NFL do you watch, and it's like, Dad, this dude was like one of the top offensive linemen coming out of high school, and then a second round pick, and I'm just like, what's going on with Clemson development of offensive line? I mean, that's what really concerns me. And I hope Riley's able to fix the issues. But I like them bringing Chad Morrissey and Scott back to help out. I think Scott Fodder also came back with him because Scott Fodder was one of the best offensive line coaches there was. Under Bobby Bowden in that South Carolina. So I think that might help out, but I just want to see more development. And more development with the wide receivers, too. That's why I was also excited to see Scott back. I think Ty Grimsley, I believe it is, I think he was a little bit over his head at Clemson because I haven't seen the development in the wide receivers like he have in the past. So that's why I cannot wait to see the season. And hey, we see what it is, and I agree with you. Duke is going to be a tough test that first week. Echo is a great coach. I'm surprised he went to Duke, but we seen what happened with Texas A&M after he left, and we seen what he did at Wake Forest also. So I think Clemson's gonna be in for a challenge, and I hope they are ready to play on that Monday, because I think Clemson's going to get a scare, and I think it's going to be like 27-14 17, somewhere around there. And I think that Duke is going to give Clemson some issues. I mean, Clemson got a lot of talent back and a lot of players, but it is a new system, and that coach is very good. And they should have beat Carolina last year.
Yes, which would have taken them to the ACC championship game. They got ripped off in that game, actually. They were up a score, and they were driving, and they scored a touchdown. They ran for a touchdown, and they called a ticky-tack holding penalty on the offensive line, and I believe the right tackle in that game. And then Carolina came down and scored the game-winning touchdown with 10 or 15 seconds left.
Right. Yeah, they're really good. I mean, they don't get a lot of respect either. But I think Duke and NC State's going to surprise some people this year. But I'm not going to hold you up too long, Mark. Hey, we're going to enjoy the season. I'll be on Patreon looking for your picks.
We'll try to do a good job picking the game, Stray. I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good night.
Take care, Mark.
Good to hear from you.
Thank you.
Awesome to hear from our guy, DeAndre, BGPO Football Funk, looking for our picks on Patreon. There you go. Dre and I always talk the betting angles, and of course, you can get my predictions on Patreon. We'll provide a few picks here, like we used to here at the Voice of College Football on the main channel, but most of the picks there on Patreon. We'll divide that in some way that you can count on it, knowing, okay, Mark's going to deliver these picks. Whether those are the top 25 picks or a certain conference or whatever the case might be here on the national channel. And then we'll have the rest of them on Patreon. But before we take this next call, just to underline this point, I have never seen this before that I can remember. Duke brings back every rushing yard and every reception. Everybody who did anything on offense comes back. Of course, not the offensive lineman, but they only miss one offensive lineman. They bring back 4 of 5 from a team that did not play a bad game last year. They did not play a bad game. They didn't lose a game 30-10. They lost 4 games, all by 1 score. Now, losing to Georgia Tech is not necessarily something to be proud of, but they did lose in overtime by a field goal, and it is Duke. So that's pretty impressive. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line? Hello. I believe we've got Donald. Is it Donald? Hello, sir. Donald, are you with us? Hello? Going once? Going twice? All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Our buddy David's here.
Yes, to the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Very interesting conference this year for the ACC. I wanted to ask, do you make predictions on who's going to be, or did you already make a prediction on who's going to be the all-conference quarterback in this conference?
No, I generally steer clear of predicting what other people are going to select.
Okay. Although, well, you make team predictions like other folks would, but not.
Yeah, but team predictions are based on results on the field. But my basic statement, my philosophy there is, how should I know what other people are going to vote on? Now, if you want to ask me who the best quarterback in the conference is, then I'll let you know.
Okay. Who's the best quarterback in the ACC according to Mark Rogers?
If everybody plays to their ceiling and this particular player continues to develop, it's Drake May of North Carolina. As it stands right this second, at the conclusion of last season, it was Jordan Travis.
All right. Are you buying Klubnik at Clemson?
I got to tell you, I'm picking Clemson, as you can see, in first place to go to the championship game. But he was not. He was shaky. So he came in the second half when they were down by 2 scores against Syracuse. Right. And they came back and won the game, but he really didn't do anything. Like, Like they blocked punts and had defensive turnovers, and the defense basically took over the game and won the game. He just kind of handed the ball off and threw a couple screen passes.
Right.
Then they threw him in against Notre Dame. Now, this was kind of unfair.
Right.
They threw him into the game at South Bend 21-0 with the ball at like the 3-yard line.
Right. Yeah.
He threw a pick six almost immediately. And then he played the entire bowl game, which that's a fair analysis judgment for him to have all that prep time, all that practice time.
Yeah.
DJ, they had already decided, okay, he's not the guy. And he didn't look too great in the bowl game either.
See, that's what that kind of gave me pause. You're right. He had a lot of prep. I believe he actually came in the title game too. Mark, did he play pretty much the entire second half of the title game, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, that sounds right. It was a title game. I was watching other games, but yeah, that sounds right.
I thought, because I remember Dabo being interviewed at halftime of that game and pretty much saying that they were going to go with him, in the second half of that game.
I do remember that. Yep.
And, I thought he would play a little bit better. I mean, Tennessee's defense last year wasn't bad, but I would have thought he could have done a little bit more business against Tennessee's defense in that bowl game,
Yes.
especially considering, I mean, I know it's an SEC defense, but it's not a top tier SEC defense by any stretch of the imagination.
You're being
in
kind to
Knoxville
say
last year.
it was good.
Right, exactly. And
it was
I thought,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, see, I was big on Clemson going into last year. I want to say I picked them, I believe, as one of my 4 playoff teams. I thought they had the best defensive line in the country going in, and we discussed that last year going into last season. And I thought Ungalele was going to have a really good year. But you know what? That team was flirting with disaster the entire year, weren't they, Mark?
They were more so the year before. The year before is when they really just slogged it out against Boston College and everybody else. But you're right. The Syracuse game, they were down 2 scores in the second half. They barely won that game.
Right.
And
Wake Forest.
The Wake Forest game. Oh, the Wake Forest game. Yeah. It was an overtime.
Yep.
Double or triple, 51-45. Yeah, they pretty much took care of Florida State. It was only a 1-score game at the end of the game, but they pretty much handled that. I'm trying to think. They crushed Miami. They crushed Georgia Tech.
Right.
I'm trying to think if anybody else really gave them. I'm sure NC State. I got to think that game was close, but that doesn't come to mind right away. And see, what my concern is, if last year's any reflection on this year, is just out of conference, they got smashed. They went 0-3 against their 3 big opponents.
Yeah, I agree. I was not surprised. I was just the line that I was going with is I wasn't surprised what necessarily happened with them at South Bend. In fact, if I was going to pick games, I would have picked Notre Dame to win that game going in. Just with the way they were playing, because they weren't dominant going into that game and playing a really high level of football. Not that Notre Dame was playing extremely well, but you just saw that as a game coming for Clemson, I think, with the fact that they were kind of scraping by in some of their games. And that's the point I was basically trying to illustrate. I think it's an interesting year. I mean, I think they can win this conference. I'm kind of with you. I think 3, maybe 4 teams could win this conference. I was going to ask you about Florida State, though. Are you one of those that's not drinking the Florida State Kool-Aid? I can see by you picking them 9-3 that you're not necessarily buying them as a trendy playoff team. Some people have gone that far. I'm not willing to go that far. Yeah,
I'm a bit hesitant to face my Florida State contingent on Wednesday night. And I'm not necessarily just talking about the people that watch the show, but the guys that do the show with me, because they're Florida State guys. Mm-hmm. And they think that 11-1 is kind of just, that's to be expected. They're definitely going to go 11-1. And if things break right, they'll go 12-0. Like they think, this is going to be a walk in the park to the championship game. And I don't see that.
Are they that confident in the opener?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I'm not. As you can see, they're losing to LSU.
You know what? Here's the way I feel about that game. I think it's more important to Florida State than it is to LSU. Because here's the thing. I think Florida State loses that game. I know they're in the ACC, but I think that I think Florida State could still win the ACC, but they're going to have to be able to beat Clemson twice if they lose that game, in my view. Because a two-loss team from the ACC is not making the playoff.
No.
And I actually do think it's Clemson that they would have to play in the title game.
Yeah, which means they would have to, if they lose to LSU, would have to go to Death Valley, win the regular season game, then win the ACC championship game. They've got a game the first weekend of November at Pittsburgh that I think has red alert written all over it, upset special.
You know, it's interesting what Narduzzi is doing at Pitt. I was always interested to see long term how good of a hire he was going to be there, and if he could get that program heading in the right direction. But yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised to see them at least be an 8-4, maybe 9-3 football team. I think that May and North Carolina are the team that could really, especially if on the right week, if he's got a hot hand that could really be that like fly in the ointment team.
Well, the thing is, it depends on if you're talking about a team to derail another team or if you're talking about a team that can make it all the way. Because, yeah, North Carolina could be that team. They play Clemson the second to last game of the season. So listen to Clemson's closing run. Starting on the last weekend of October, they go to North Carolina State. They host Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, at South Carolina.
Yeah, right now I'm still leaning Florida State to win the conference because I think they can get back against Clemson when they meet in Jacksonville in the title game. But I see the winner of this conference, just like you, as being a two-loss team. So a bottom line, a two-loss team is not making the playoff. It could be tough enough to be a one-loss team making the playoff out of this conference, don't you think, Mark?
Yes, unless the conference proves something outside the conference during the regular season. But if it's the same conference that I think it to be, it's the fourth or fifth conference. So they've got a lot of these games against Notre Dame. They've got good teams playing Notre Dame too. They've got Clemson, NC State, Pitt, Duke all play Notre Dame this year. So they have opportunities. And then you've got Clemson playing South Carolina. Let's say South Carolina is a decent team, an 8-4 kind of team. And of course, the Florida State opener against LSU. So there will be opportunities in these non-conference games for the ACC to prove otherwise.
Yeah, that first game being the biggest among them. Boy, I've got that circled. I actually am I'm bullish on LSU this year, by the way.
I am the closer we get to the season as well. I am.
I'm wondering if this is the moment for Brian Kelly, by the way. It could be a changing of the guard on that side of the SEC.
Wouldn't that be something?
Could that be?
Well, they somewhat changed the guard last year, not in impressive fashion, but they technically did wrestle away the division, of course. So,
well, but I mean, you look at that team. I like Daniels at quarterback. I mean, Mark, a lot of people believe they have the best defensive player in college football. So, I mean, I think you're going to see. I've seen more than a few people pick them to make the playoff.
I've made the statement a number of times during the offseason that yes, that when I watched Harold Perkins play, I thought he was the best player on the defensive side in college football. At least, you can't scout these guys play to play, but in terms of making game-changing plays on a fairly regular basis, he's the reason they won at Auburn. He's the reason they won against Arkansas. He's just a freak athlete. And my LSU guys tell me that Mason Smith, who got hurt in the opener against Florida State last year, plays along the defense front, that he's better than Harold Perkins, that he's the best player on the team.
Didn't it seem like Daniels got better as the season went along for that team?
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
certainly took his lumps. I watched the Tennessee game. It wasn't good. Some of those games early on, um, I think, were, dicey, but I thought he kind of gained his confidence as the season went along, played really well in the upset over Alabama. Yeah, they're going to be interesting this year. They're going to be interesting this year. That Florida State LSU game is definitely one of the biggest. I mean, Texas going to Tuscaloosa is going to be really interesting, but that's going to be real interesting. By the way, could Quinn Ewers start his Heisman candidacy in Tuscaloosa this year, Mark?
He could, but I'm not going to bank on it. He's high on the Heisman odds list.
I saw that. I was wondering, Mark, do you never make a Heisman prediction before the season starts, or give any do you give like a list or a short list of no?
Yeah, I've done Heisman videos in the past because they do well, but it's been a long time since I've done one. I more so talk about who should have won it that didn't win it. Christian McCaffrey,
right?
Deshaun Watson. That's what upsets me when somebody I believe that should have won it is deprived of the Heisman, and that's when I take off on it. But for me to make a prediction on who's going to win the Heisman goes back to my original point of our conversation. I don't like to predict what other people are voting on. I don't have control over that. Not that I have control over a game, but it's kind of silly to predict what somebody else is going to vote on. I don't know what they're going to vote.
So you've done the ACC. What's next on the list of conference predictions for the great Mark Rogers?
Big 12 Wednesday night.
Big 12 Wednesday night. I've got to be back for that. I think that's going to be an interesting race. I'm early leaning towards Texas. I don't want to tip my hand, but I think yours is going to have a big year. I think this could be a big year for Sark. I'm leaning Texas, but I think Oklahoma's going to be very good. I just want to be interested to see what they look like in a second year under Venables. I think TCU is a team that's going to be tough to repeat what they did last year.
Sure.
There's going to have to be a drop off there.
SEC Thursday, Big Ten Friday.
Ooh, Big Ten Friday.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll have that circled. I want to see. Have you already made your decisions on the Big Ten, Mark, or where you at with that?
I have in no way made a decision. I'll put it like this.
Yes.
My decision would go, as I look for this video file, would go right now. Penn State. What do the numbers work out to? Whatever. Penn State 5% and Ohio State and Michigan each 47.5%. That would be where I'm leaning.
Boy, this thing's coming right down to the wire.
All of the logical points are on Michigan's side. Just the experience of the quarterback, the game in Ann Arbor, not having a legitimate schedule other than that. Ohio State's got to go to Wisconsin. They've got the Notre Dame game. And of course, that has no bearing on the Big Ten race, but in terms of the playoff and Ohio State's shaky defense last year and trying to figure that out. Michigan having this stalwart offensive line the last few years that's won the Joe Moore Award, and they picked up a couple other tremendous transfers from Stanford and elsewhere, Arizona State, and Ohio State still shuffling the offensive line, and of course the inexperienced quarterback. And isn't it going to be fascinating to see if Kyle McCord's a starter or Devin Brown? All that, it's so heavy on Michigan's side, but you know what? Something just tells me that Ohio State's just and Michigan fans are going to blast me for this, and I get it. I just think Ohio State is just better.
Who has the more overall talented roster?
Yes.
Who has the more overall? To be fair, who has the more overall talented roster?
It's not really. And when I say it's not close, that doesn't mean it's not competitive. It means it's not debatable who has more talent.
I mean, now I could say that's the last 2 years. I could say that's been the case. And what's happened? I get it.
Yes,
I know what they're going to say before they even say it. I get the point they're making. I know where the game is being played. Now, I expect Ohio State to be a much better team by the end of the year than they are by the start of the year. And that's the other thing that I'm banking on, is that the team you see in September is not the team you're going to see in November. I think it's a team that's going to get better as the year goes along.
If Ohio State is focused and right between the ears, and I am fascinated to see how the running back distribution works and the playing time and how they're utilized. I'm fascinated to see that, because I still say, and I had a lot of Michigan fans misquote me when I posted a video looking at the 10 best running backs in the Big Ten, when I said Ohio State had the best running back room. And I will continue to pound my fist that Ohio State does have the best running back room in the Big Ten. I didn't say the 2 best running backs, but it's the best room. So they can suffer losses to a certain extent. But yeah, I really think Travion Henderson, we're really going to find out what he's all about.
Listen, how many people had him predicted as a preseason All-American going into last year, Mark?
Oh,
Like, I mean, if you
yes.
look at most magazines, if you get a preseason magazine from a year ago, there were a ton of people that picked him to be a preseason All-American last year, or at least one of the 2 or 3 best running backs. Next, right after maybe Bijan Robinson, he was one of the best running backs in the country going into last season and on a lot of All-American lists. He was. I mean, he had 1,200 yards as a freshman. Let's not forget he had a really good freshman year. He wasn't all bad. And, he had a lot of injuries last year. I mean, it's tough to run when the guy's trying to run on a broken foot. One would say that's pretty important for a running back. And for me, I think they do need to lean on the running game early. I'll say this. I think I like their running back room, but it's up to the play calling. I mean, they've got to lean on that running game early, especially with a new quarterback, younger offensive line. I think they should run Hayden. I think they should run Williams, and I think they should run Henderson and try and distribute the carries as evenly as possible. I would lean a little bit more Henderson, maybe Williams, but I liked what I saw from Hayden at the end of the year. I do think they will come up with a good offensive line. My concern is if they have an injury. Their depth could be a concern, especially on the interior of the line. Well, even maybe a tackle, but that they'll find 5 good offensive linemen. If they sustain an injury or 2, that's where the concern will be. I don't want them to rotate quarterbacks. I got bad vibes of 1996 and 2015. I don't want to live that movie over again. We don't need to be rotating quarterbacks and doing Stanley Jackson and Joe Germain or JT Barrett and Cardell Jones part 2. I lived in that world. I don't want to live in that world again.
So this is the plight, folks, of an Ohio State fan. If you're not familiar, David does want to relive 1996, does not want to relive 2015. Those 2 teams went 11-1 and 12-1 and finished number 2 and number 3 in the country.
Yes, but they very easily could have, maybe even should have won national championships.
Sure.
I mean, Sean Springs slipped, and their offensive coaches have brain farts against Sparty and forget they have one of the 2 best running backs in the country and don't give him the damn ball. And well, whatever.
I got you, David.
Yeah,
we're going to run back to our ACC analysis here,
yes,
David. We
yes, I know.
You being here.
I will be back for Big 12, and I will be back for Mullet Man's. Well, ex-Mullet Man's going to have a big year for Texas, though. I will say that.
Thank you, David. Good to see you.
Take care, Mark. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Our guy, David Greenshield. Before we get to our next caller, JR, let's read off our Super Chats. We thank you so much for your contributions, folks. Here we go. We've got Falconer, TRX. Prediction, Miami, ACC, and national champion, 100%. Let's shut down the stream right now. Falconer TRX has locked it down. Miami will win the national championship. Hey, if TCU went from 5-7 to the college football playoff, why not? TCU, 5-7. College football playoff. Falconer TRX, thank you so much, sir. More Wake talk than entire national media. Exactly. This is what we do here at the Voice of College Football. We break it down like no one else. So we appreciate our guy Holden for calling in to talk Wake football. I loved it because it just never happens unless Holden calls. Falconer TRX, thank you for keeping us afloat here. This show, by the way, the ACC prediction show, brought to you by Falconer TRX, our presenting sponsor. Miami beats Florida State at Trailer Haas E wide right 9. Is it just 9? Yes. Okay. Miami pulls off the big upset in Doe Campbell. Then we've got Bizzer, who has reminded all of us something we all know already. Michigan beat Cheaton. That's common knowledge, of course. Yes. And then finally, Slap Happy stepping in here with a super sticker. So I've been doing this YouTube thing for about 10 years, really longer than that, but for about 10 years, and I still don't know what the mystery of the super sticker is. Stickers. What? Anyway, but we appreciate the super stickers. So if you would like to chime in with a super sticker and you've got nothing to say but want to contribute here to the Voice of College Football, have at it. Pick out a nice one. All right, JR's on the line to talk some ACC football. JR, what's going on tonight?
Hey, nothing much. How are you doing, Mark?
I am doing well. What's going on?
Well, I got some thoughts and I figured I'd share them. So,
Sure.
And they're ACC relevant. So, hey, just really liked your analysis. I came in a little bit late, so apologize if some of my questions you already answered. But I think you said you had Clemson 10-2.
Yes.
10-2. Who's your 2 losses against them?
All right. So let me go to the big screen here and get the results back up here. So I will say that I am big into probabilities and then trying to target those upsets because there will be upsets, of course. I don't know if you've heard me ever say this, but I've kept track of this for 4 or 5 years, and out of the top 25 games each week, which are usually about 18, 20, 22 games, 20 to 25% of them are upsets. So there will be upsets. Okay. So I've not targeted exact wins or losses. However, obviously, since I've come up with a 3-way tie for second place, I'm going to have to figure out who won and lost those games to figure out what the tiebreaker is going to be. I've made it difficult on myself. I could have played it easy and gone, well, Florida State's going to go 7-1 as well, and they'll go to the ACC championship game. So most likely for Clemson, what I'm looking at is that they are going to defeat Florida State in Death Valley. And then let me look at their schedule. Okay, the out-of-conference loss is to Notre Dame. Wait a minute. You know what? I'd have to think about that because actually I've got Notre Dame beating USC, losing to Ohio State. I am not picking Notre Dame to go. Guess they could lose another game in there. So again, I'm not predicting exact games. I'm just making sure that it can happen, that it's feasible. I am searching for Clemson's schedule here to try to find you. I started to produce videos where I listed the probability of losses in order. And I didn't do that. I didn't get to too many teams, unfortunately. Didn't have the time. I'll say it this way, that most likely their in-conference loss is going to be to Florida State would be the first selection, and then NC State would be number 2 for me, and then at Duke would be number 3, and then North Carolina would be 4, and then I don't really see them possibly losing to anyone else. I guess Miami is the talent to possibly win.
That's what I was going to say.
Clemson.
Yeah, I feel like Miami. I just feel like Josh Gaddis really, really hurt that offense last year and hurt Tyler Van Dyke. I really feel like he's a much better quarterback than what he showed. And I felt like that scheme didn't really fit him super well, as best I could tell. I'm not out here watching all 22 film or anything like that, but they've got kind of some sleeper tough road games here. The South Carolina. I mean, they lost to them last year on the road there to end the season. I mean, can you imagine a 2-loss Clemson team coming into South Carolina? They're dejected. They're not going to the playoffs. If that were to happen, not saying it will, but if that were to happen, I could see Clemson finishing off with 3 losses here. And I don't know, call me crazy, and I'm sure some people will, but I don't like that Duke game to start the year. I know you have them 6-6, and I kind of agree they're probably going to be around that, but that's a tough game, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it is. This is what I had to say about the Duke game. You may not have been around at this point, but basically that I don't believe I've ever seen this before. Duke brings back every pass reception from last season and every rushing yard from the entire team.
Mm-hmm.
They bring back 18 of 21 starters, 10 of 11 on offense, only miss 1 offensive lineman. The impressive thing about what Mike Elko did last year, in addition to all that, is that they didn't play a bad game. They didn't go out and lose to anybody 34-10. They were within 1 score of everyone. Told this story a zillion times. I'm watching whatever games I'm watching, and I see North Carolina, Duke are going down to the wire. I flip over to the game, watch the last 5 minutes. Duke's up a score. They run for a touchdown. Gets called back on a bad holding penalty that I thought was a bad call. Otherwise, they beat North Carolina. They go to the ACC championship game. I don't know what to make out of all that, because I don't know that they're that really that good, but they bring back all that production from a team that was that close to playing in the ACC championship game. They go to Florida State in November. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think I was going to say the same thing. I looked at I don't know if you reference him at all, but the Bill Connolly ESPN guy who puts out the returning production stats, and I was kind of astonished at how much production they were bringing back on offense. And I did, like you said, kind of looked to see what receivers are back, and I was like, wow, every single one of these guys, and not to mention Riley Leonard too. Another another hot take, but I think Riley Leonard might have a better year than Cade Klubnik. I don't want to say that for sure, because Clemson has had a really good line of QBs with Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, of course. However, last year with DJU, it was just a really, really tough year to watch for him, and I always felt like there was more talent there than what they were kind of allowing him to do. And of course he missed throws too. I'm not saying it was all Clemson's fault or anything like that, but I don't know. I really feel like people are kind of just pushing Duke to the side and saying, oh, it was just one fluke year, but I don't know. I could see him at 8-9 wins again, maybe. I think it's interesting. That would be one of my favorite teams to watch this year if they can do that.
Yeah. Duke, of course, opens with Clemson. They've got kind of an interesting game at Connecticut, actually. Northwestern would have been interesting a few years ago, but that's just a debacle there. They've got Notre Dame at home the final Saturday of September. Of course, doesn't factor into the conference race, but just going to be an interesting measuring stick, regardless of what happens at Clemson, to see, okay, do they confirm what they showed us against Clemson, where they only lost by 6? And they're really that good because they played Notre Dame to a 1-score game. But then they've got a bye week before they prepare for NC State and Florida State. And just kind of looking on the flip side, looking at Florida State, they've got a stretch in November, which I know for most people, they just don't think that these teams are going to compete with FSU, but Duke, Wake, and Pitt with the last 2 games on the road during a 3-game stretch, I think is going to be tricky for Florida State to navigate.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but that mesh offense that Wake runs, that's not going anywhere, right? The offensive coordinator is still there, just Sam Hartman left, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean that's a tough offense for anybody to face. It's kind of like, well, I guess not exactly, but I've heard some people say it's kind of hard to prepare for, kind of like you're preparing for Navy, Army, the kind of triple option stuff, just because kind of I don't want to call it gimmicks because that makes it sound like the players aren't as good, but just some of the kind of special things that they do that can make it difficult to prepare for. So yeah, I think the ACC, I don't think it's the strongest conference out there, but I do think it's going to be one of the most interesting to watch. And who knows if Clemson can prove us all wrong and Garrett Riley is the savior that some people think he is. Who knows? Maybe they are a better conference than we realize, and Clemson will kind of. I'm putting more stock in Clemson surprising us and getting to the playoffs than I am Florida State. I think I'm kind of with you, and I'm glad I saw you have them at 9-3 because I just don't think I'm on the bandwagon that it seems like most of the national media are with them.
I'm wrestling with Florida State because they did have a number of players, Jared Verse in particular, that had NFL opportunities, and outside of Jamie Robinson, they all decided to come back, and so they've got a ton of production back. They picked up some really good transfers. Jaden Fisk, the defensive lineman from one of the Michigan directional schools, is a really good player. Fentrell Cypress, cornerback from Virginia, was an all ACC player. They bring him in. Somebody else is escaping. Well, Keon Coleman, Michigan State wide receiver, caught 60 balls. Jaheim Bell, South Carolina tight end. Not a real productive player, but like a freak athlete that you expect should dominate, but really didn't do much at South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I watched last year was that they lost to good teams and they beat up on 6 marginal to bad opponents during their hot stretch at the conclusion of the season.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is I feel like they beat the teams they were supposed to beat, and they lost to the teams they were supposed to lose to. Now, wait, they lost to Wake, right? I don't know if you call that one.
In
they
NC
were
State.
to lose to. In NC State, yeah. So, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were both ranked teams at the time when they played them.
Yes.
So good teams that were difficult for them to play. So I don't know. I really feel like sometimes we get too caught up in this returning production and, the transfer portal. Sometimes I think we just get too caught up in it. And I feel like we just have to look at the teams in college football who has that, kind of winning culture, who has that kind of winning vibe with them, I guess you could say, because as much as some people would love to say we love parity in college football, and I like it too, don't get me wrong, but there's not that much. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State kind of are the top. I don't know if they're the top 3 every year, but they kind of are always near the top, and Clemson's always near the top. And so it's really, really difficult for me to say for sure some team is going to elevate to that level in the next season.
I'll say it this way, JR, that you're completely right, but I'll also play devil's advocate to that to a certain extent, because I think 2 things are true. The elite don't change. They just really don't change since the college football playoff era. And I think this is a remarkable statistic I bring up every so often. Basically, all you have to do is spit out 3 names, and that's the summation of the college football playoff. The SEC, Clemson, and Ohio State. Every meaningful game won has been won by those 3, and they've only defeated each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like Clemson hasn't lost to anybody but Ohio State in the SEC, and the SEC has been the only one to defeat Ohio State besides Clemson. It's
Right.
They're the only three that have done anything. So, and then you got Oklahoma, whatever you want to rate them as an elite, but they've lost all their playoff games. But here's a stat for you. I track this from year to year. Teams that have either increased their win total by at least 3 or decreased their win total from the previous season by 3. And I came up with that as kind of an arbitrary number, but it seems to me to be significant.
Mhm.
Once you hit 3, like you were 8-4 2 years ago, but then you went 5-7, that's a significant decrease, for example. And 27 of the 65 Power 5 teams last year had that much of a change in record from 2021. So that's
Wow.
significant.
Mm-hmm.
So there are those teams out there that are going to have this radical Michigan State from 5-7 to 10-2 in 1 year, and then back to 5-7 the next year,
Mm-hmm.
kind of deal.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, I was thinking, we've seen more teams kind of elevate past those 3 wins into the playoffs than we have seen the teams go up 3 wins and into the playoffs. I feel like I haven't done the math on that, so don't, maybe I'm wrong, but I think Michigan from 2020 to 2021, what were they, 2-4, and then
Yes,
they go 11-1, beat Ohio State for the first time in years, and they make it to the college football playoffs. Now they didn't do great, but they still made it there.
sure.
TCU last year, I forget what they were the year before. I think they had a losing record, 5-7. So yeah, again, not a great record, losing record, and that's a jump of a number of wins to make the national championship. To beat Michigan and do that. And so I don't know. While everybody's looking at Florida State to possibly bump in, or while everybody's looking at LSU to bump in, I find myself looking more at the 4-8 and 5-7 teams and saying, is there a path somewhere for somebody like this who can make it in? And
Texas A&M.
yeah, and that was one that I was thinking a lot of. I know Alabama's going to be daunting, and so is LSU. I'm not sure I believe all the hype that LSU is better, but they did win last year. So, we have to give them credit for that. But if there's a team that has the talent to do it, and if Bobby Petrino can come in there and, really shake things up, it could happen. And that's kind of the parity in college football that not everybody expects, but seems to happen more often.
All right, JR. Appreciate the call. We're going to keep it moving here.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yep. You too. Bye.
All right. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We got DeReal MVP here.
Hey, Mark. How you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm looking at your standings, and
Yes.
I guess I like being a little more out there than you with some of these
Yes.
picks. I could see North Carolina, for example, losing their first 4 games of the season, which is out South Carolina, home against App State, same for Minnesota, on the road against Pittsburgh. I mean, those are
Okay.
4 really hard games,
Yes.
and
So I agree with you. I could see them losing, but what's the probability that this is going to happen?
I put it like 10%.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I think 1-3's over 50% chance of happening.
Over 50% chance that they're going to go 1-3.
Yeah, to start off the season.
Okay. I would say over 50%, 2-2. Because
I'm just
all
not
those
sold.
teams are toss-ups. Well, the Appalachian State, they're going to be a significant favorite in that game. The other 3 are, even the Minnesota game, they're going to be a decent favorite in that game. I bet they're a touchdown to 10-point favorite against Minnesota. Not that I don't think Minnesota can beat them.
See, I'm just not sold on North Carolina's defense getting any better at all. I know Drake May's a great quarterback. He's in the Heisman discussion for a reason, but I'm not sold on Gene Chizik as their defensive coordinator.
Yeah, you've picked off teams that are in the preseason top 25 that you've systematically logically kind of gauged teams, not just thrown crap at the wall, but that could take a huge tumble. And it makes sense. North Carolina, Florida State, and a few others. Yeah. I see it.
And their final 3 games is they're on home. They're at home against Duke, on the road against Clemson, on the road against NC State.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those. They could lose all 3 of those games too.
So, do you have a final record for UNC?
5-7.
5-7.
Yeah, they just missed a bowl game.
All right.
And I'm giving them a few games in there. By the way, I think they'll beat Miami, for example. I think they do beat NC State. Another team on the opposite direction is Louisville. I think Louisville.
Hang on just a second, real quick. If they're going to defeat NC State, then who else are they losing to?
Georgia Tech. I'm looking at that Georgia Tech game.
All right.
And Brent Key, he was really good. You could tell that the players bought into his system.
Sure. Yeah.
I could see Georgia Tech making a bowl game this year at 6-6.
They went 4-2 with him. 4-2.
Now for Louisville.
Yeah. Yes.
6-6. I don't know how you came up with that prediction. I think 10-2 is much more likely than 6-6
How did I
for Louisville.
come up with that? Like you're telling me like Louisville's going 10 and 11 wins every year? Like that would be a shock to anyone.
I understand that, but if you look at Louisville's schedule,
yes,
it's pretty weak.
Okay, well, they got 3 consecutive outings where they go to NC State, Notre Dame at home, at Pitt. I don't like that stretch. I think they lose 2 minimum. Maybe
I see 2 minimum. I see 2 minimum as well. But after that, I mean,
yeah,
there's just not a whole lot there.
Yeah, they got Virginia Tech and Virginia that are gimmies. They do have Duke, but that's at home. I think they're going to lose both of these out of conference games to Notre Dame and Kentucky. Yeah, I came up with 4 losses in conference, so that's most likely going to be NC State, Pitt, Duke, and they trip up somewhere. That's pretty much what I'm looking at.
I mean, I think they make the ACC championship game at 10-2 or 9-3 against Clemson. I mean, if you look at the over/under number, it's at 8.5, I believe now.
Yeah.
So, assuming they're underdogs against Notre Dame and Kentucky, which I think is pretty likely, Vegas is suggesting they only lose 1 out of conference games or 2, and I think that puts them in the ACC championship game.
So who else is going to make the ACC championship game?
Clemson.
Okay. Clemson, Louisville.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you saw the standings that I posted throughout the show, but I've got Clemson, and I've got to figure out what the 3-way tie is going to be between Pitt, Florida State, and NC State.
Right.
So I got to figure out who's defeating who, and we'll have that when we wrap it all up at the end.
Right.
Of the week.
I think Pittsburgh could be a 9-3 team. I'm a little bit lower on NC State. I think they're 8-4, 7-5. I like Miami at 8-4. That's another one of those teams I think that hits that +3 win marker.
Gotcha.
That we're looking for. Virginia Tech, that's 5-7. I'm just not a believer in Brent Key or anything they're doing. They're struggling against teams like Old Dominion. It's possible they go on the road to Rutgers and lose. I'm just not inspired by them at all.
Brent Pry, yes.
Yeah, Brent Pry.
Not to be confused.
Did I say Brent Key?
Yeah, Georgia Tech, Virginia.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Bad ACC teams are easy to confuse.
Yeah. So 5-7 for them, I actually think would be a very successful season.
Yeah, let's see. So, yeah, they could lose to Rutgers, certainly. They've got, you did say Rutgers. Yeah, Purdue and Rutgers, they play 2 Big Ten teams. And Old Dominion and Marshall on the, you know what? I may have to amend that. I may have breezed past that. Virginia Tech could lose that game.
Yeah, I mean, if they're struggling to beat Old Dominion, I mean, Marshall, I feel, is a significant step up than Old Dominion.
All right. Well, I gave them 2-2 out of conference. I can live with that between those 4 games. But they're all losable for sure.
Yeah.
Then they start with Pitt and Florida State in conference.
That's 2 L's right there.
Yeah, they're in for a rough go.
Right. I could even see 2-10 for Virginia Tech this year. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Shoot, 1-11's on the table for how bad. I just don't believe in them at all. They're a bad football team, and they have been for quite a few years.
Yeah.
I mean, last year didn't they get blown out by West Virginia at home? And West Virginia was probably the worst team in the Big 12.
Yeah, they lost 33-10.
Yeah, it's not exactly a great look for Virginia Tech.
Yeah, they only they only won one ACC game against Boston College. They lost to West Virginia by 23, North Carolina by 31, Pitt by 16. They did stay within 1 point of NC State and Georgia Tech. They lost by 17 to Duke. Yeah, that's an ugly season. I don't know what they've really done to make that any better. I think they've got the worst quarterback situation and passing game in the league.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Virginia. You would think one of the 2 Virginia schools, at a minimum per year, should at least be a top 40 team. I don't feel like that's too much to ask for, but apparently it is, because both of them are just irrelevant. And they've been relevant for a few years now.
DeReal, I would say that you made a comment the other night that you had learned a long time ago not to come unprepared to an argument with me. And I will say that you're making compelling arguments concerning some of these ACC teams, Louisville in the positive direction, Virginia Tech in the negative direction.
Well, I try to do my best, Mark. I try to come here and be factual. You got to be on your game when you're talking to Mark Rogers. I've learned that the hard way.
It's good stuff.
Yeah,
Any
no
other
problem.
thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to ask, can I talk about conference realignment for a bit?
Sure.
So I saw an article from John Wilner, and
Yeah.
shout out to Greg Lugar from Peek Around the Corner for pointing it out.
Yeah.
It seems like Arizona was the linchpin that destroyed the Pac-12 from the article that was mentioned, because Arizona on Thursday night was invited. They put an application to the Big 12. Once that move took place, the Big 10 said, hey, we can go poach Oregon and Washington, and we're not going to look like the bad guys. They poached Oregon and Washington, and then the whole house of cards fell, is basically what the article described.
Yeah, so I did not read that article. I did hear bits and pieces of that and other sources that basically laid it out that the Big Ten did not want to look like the bad guy and was waiting for other moves to be made to say, hey, it's kind of falling into place and it's up for grabs and it's already falling apart. So we're just here to pick up the pieces kind of deal. Yeah.
Right. I don't think the Big Ten was looking for expansion at all. But once they saw the Pac-12 was essentially dead, I feel like they decided, hey, we might as well make a move, because are we going to get Oregon and Washington at this price ever again? Would you agree with that analysis?
Yeah. The value that the Big Ten received with Washington and Oregon only receiving that 50% share is astounding. I read, speaking of articles, and I don't get to read as much as I would really like to read of various really good stuff that's out there. But on The Athletic here in the last couple of days, they have a long article on Rutgers' move to the Big Ten and how disastrous that has been for Rutgers football and why the Big Ten did it. And it made complete sound business sense for the Big Ten to do it. And I know people criticize it because of the awful football at Rutgers, and I've even made the comment that Rutgers did not bring a fan base from New York City, but what their presence did was it allowed the Big Ten to invade, and the percentages were given in terms of the population in that eastern corridor and how much of the entire country that is. And regardless of who they wanted to watch, just being on the cable systems brought $1 per cable system, and it was in the tens of millions of dollars that just having Rutgers, and there's some type of agreement between the cable systems and the various conferences that if they're bringing in schools that are within that footprint, that they bring $1 per cable subscription, versus if they're outside the footprint, it's only like 15 cents. So signing Rutgers brought multi-millions of dollars into the Big Ten because of that. But what's happened to Rutgers is that they have obviously gotten trampled on the field. They're 13-66 in the Big Ten. Some of the statistics they put, which didn't surprise any of us, because we've seen Rutgers getting trampled in these games week after week after week. They lost 21 consecutive games at one point in the Big Ten. They lost one season by an average of 50-11 every game. You know, they've just been deplorable in the conference. And now they're like $250 million in debt, and they don't have any luxury suites at their stadium. Therefore, they can't benefit from those kind of dollar figures. And it's pretty much of a mess. And they've only dug themselves deeper trying to compete in a conference where they're in over their heads. And they've not received a fair, or I shouldn't call it a fair, a equal revenue share until just recently.
Right. Now I'm
Anyway,
reading
taking us in another direction. My apologies.
No, you're fine. I was reading the chat as you were going with, and I saw a comment that said nobody was leaving. U of A or CU left. They are bottom dwellers. Mark, it's not about Colorado and Arizona being bottom dwellers in the Pac-12 in football, which they are. If you only got 8 schools left and you're losing schools left and right, and you don't have a media TV deal, I mean, what does that signal to everybody else? I mean, it signals you don't have a plan, you don't know what you're doing, and you're open for business of your schools being poached. Am I misreading that situation?
Yeah, the Pac-12 basically overvalued itself and proceeded accordingly, and couldn't cut a deal. And the longer that there was no deal present, the longer it was out there for the taking, and its schools for the taking. And unfortunately for the Pac-12, it coincided with a time in which the Big 12 was looking to expand at the same time. It's really fascinating if you know the storyline and the timeline of all this, how the Pac-12 and the Big 12 switched positions basically in the span of a year, where the Pac-12 was in the position of strength. They could have picked apart the Big 12. They decided not to. They weren't comfortable with those schools, those institutions being part of the Pac-12. They thought they could just stand pat and keep their schools. Little did they know that USC and UCLA were going to walk out the back door at any point. And suddenly the Big 12 went from a place of vulnerability to a place of strength, and the Pac-12 just, it's not even though the Pac-12 botched one thing and lost its league. They botched everything at every turn. They botched the media rights deal. They could have had a stable contract with ESPN. They botched the San Diego State situation. They botched not agreeing to take in teams from the Big 12. It was just a poorly run league for years and years and years.
Yeah, I saw a comment as you were going about that saying I was U of A wasn't going, you are misreading. So do you mind if I read the article from a video real quick to you? So it said Arizona's application for membership in the Big 12 played a key role in the process, according to a source. The Wildcats weren't the only school to seek a lifeboat. Utah and Arizona State University would follow them into the arms of the Big 12. But in an attempt to secure a home in case the Pac-12 collapsed, Arizona formally applied for membership in the Big 12 in the middle of the week, before Oregon and Washington rejected the Pac-12 grants of rights agreement on that fateful Friday morning. The Big 12 became aware of Arizona's application to the Big 12, according to the source. Quote, so Tony Petitti tells his presidents, we aren't the ones, the source said. Quote, they felt like they weren't the ones to fire off the kill shot. Is there anything in there that says I'm misreading or misquoting the article from this Greg Flugar video about the situation?
No.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting the facts as I see them.
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory if I interpreted that right on one run through.
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted it the same way you did, but I just wanted to make sure I got it out there. But anyway, Mark, that's all I got for you this evening, and fight on to USC.
Thanks to Real. This is our ACC prediction show, and we understand that we've got a log jam for an ACC championship game spot. What we're doing is we are picking apart every conference throughout the week. So we have laid out our predictions for the Pac-12 on Monday night, the ACC Tuesday. It's going to go the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10 on Friday. Then we'll put it all together for our college football playoff selections and championship selections. Will's on the line. Will, what's going on tonight?
What's up, Mark? Excited for the season to be starting on Saturday.
Yeah, of course you are.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any worry, concern?
Well, I mean, I'm not concerned as much as I would be because I'm always kind of concerned about Navy just because they usually play us tough. But since we're playing them first, get them out of the way, we'll have time to prepare for them. And also, they're going to be they're going to be switching quarterbacks between two quarterbacks during the game between each series. So I'm definitely feeling a bit more comfortable than I usually am against Navy.
Okay.
But I'm surprised you did our guy Mike Elko like that. Only 6-6 for Duke. I was a little.
Yeah. I will say that while they did perform well week to week, and I give them a lot of credit for playing competitive football every week, as opposed to a lot of teams will, a new coach gets there, does a lot of good things, a lot of right things, and will elevate them, and let's say to an 8-4 kind of season. But the 4 losses show that they're really not that good. They beat who they were supposed to beat, and they were nowhere close. You know, they're losing 41-10 games the other 4. Duke didn't do that. They do have a tougher run this year with the 2 divisions merging into one schedule. So they've got Clemson, they've got Florida State. They're not used to playing those teams. So they rarely play. Of course, only once every 6 years do they play either one of them. And they've got both of them this year. So keep that in mind, in addition to a game against Notre Dame that, again, only happens about 40% of the time since this contract was signed. So, and they did win, for as much credit as I give them for being close in the losses, they also won a lot of close games. So,
I mean, yeah, the Clemson, the Florida State, and the
what do you
ND
have
games
for,
are going to be tough. But
what do you have for Duke?
I was thinking 8-4 again. But I know the NC State, Louisville, and UNC games and Pitt games are probably all 50-50 games. So I guess 7-5 would be more likely. Maybe 6.
Yeah.
But
yeah, they played a ton of close games last year. To their credit, that they didn't get blown out against anybody, but still, they beat Wake by a field goal. They beat Boston College by 1 score. They lost to Georgia Tech by a field goal in overtime. They beat Northwestern, one of the worst teams in college football, when the Northwestern running back, Evan Hull, fumbled the ball in the end zone at the end of the game. So we're not talking about a talent factory here. We'll see.
I can't trust Miami. I just can't trust them to get their act together.
I'm
I mean,
trusting
I know
them to a
Aiden
certain
Ford's not
extent.
saying too much, but I
I'll,
feel like they're
I'll,
just a circus.
I'll probably get burned.
Mhm.
The
But
thing I'll say about
yeah.
Miami is that they were not only 5-7 last year. Texas A&M was 5-7, but except for that App State game, Texas A&M, they showed up and played Alabama to the wire, beat LSU, played those kind of games in the SEC West where they're playing really good teams and they're playing competitive games. Miami just looked awful. They looked like one of the most ill-prepared teams every week last year.
Mhm.
Just didn't play a good game. Their best game was against Georgia Tech, who was awful.
Mhm.
That was their only convincing win. They could have easily went 3-9.
I'm just very interested to see how their new coordinators will be because I don't know these guys' names. Like they aren't the big flashy names like Josh
No.
Gaddis and the guy that went to Alabama, older guy, Kevin Steele.
Kevin Steele. Yeah.
Oh, Charlie Strong was also a co-DC last year. But I'm just interested to see if the players will follow what these guys say because I have a feeling that there's just possibly a lack of discipline in Miami.
Yeah. That's been the culture for a long, long time. Underachieve with a top 15 roster.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that the two coaches that they brought in did really good work where they were. Shannon Dawson at Houston, and can't think of the defensive coordinator's name off the top of my head at Marshall. Anyway.
And of course, as an Irish fan, I have to be interested in what Phil Dracovic and Pitt will be doing.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the more I look at things, the more I like Pitt.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I guess maybe not. I guess relatively favorable schedule, I would say. They have VT. They have. I don't think I think Wake will take a step back without Sam and their receivers. Syracuse, BC. For sure.
Yeah. I think Pitt's schedule lines up really well.
But I don't know. I will be wondering if the injuries took a toll on Phil because I feel like Malik wasn't as good when he came back from his injury. So, but Pitt's always going to have a good defense, so that'll definitely help him out a lot.
Good defense and a good pass rush. They're always top 2 or 3 in the country in sacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pat Narduzzi has gotten them rolling. I'm just interested to see also I have since I'm from Virginia, I'm always interested to see how Tech and UVA will do. I feel like Tech just has to be better. I feel like there's some talent on that team. I mean, UVA, there's just not that much talent, but Tech generally gets good recruits. But looking back at it, Penn State just raids Virginia as a state, and they in 2023 it was Penn State, another team, Penn State. But in 2024, it's looking a bit better for the Hokies. But I mean, that won't help them this year, though. But I feel like if they win, I feel like they kind of have to win their first 4 games, that non-conference, to make a bowl game.
Yeah.
And then probably beat Virginia and Syracuse or Wake, one of those. I guess they could win 3 of those and drop a non-conference game. But yeah, I mean, their fans are crazy, but I kind of feel bad. They just filled up because they were still filling up their stadium and they're kind of having stinkers. But
yeah, it's a bad roster. It's a bad team. They don't have a quarterback.
yeah, Grant Wells.
Playmakers.
I was shocked that they're bringing back Grant Wells. He was not good. But
yeah, it's one of the worst quarterback situations in Power 5.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if he's Spencer Petras level. Would you say that he's Spencer Petras level?
Well, for one thing, he can move a little bit.
Yeah.
So he can move around a little bit. And yeah, Virginia as well. They had about a 4 quarterback race with nobody who's had any experience at the FBS level, let alone Power 5. So a couple bad football teams. Yeah.
But I don't know. With Clemson and Florida State, I don't know who's going to win, honestly. I think it all has to do with, like, will the Florida State transfers work? Will they all mesh? And Garrett Riley's play calling, like, can Garrett Riley turn Clay Kubnik around? Because I don't know. I just don't think that Clemson offensive staff was very good last year. I mean, obviously it wasn't good. We saw them crumble against South Carolina and ND. But I don't know. I'd rather Clemson win it if I had to pick a team, not just because Notre Dame's playing Clemson and it would look better for ND. I just don't like how I like teams building through recruiting. Like, I don't know. It just seems better for college football if that's how it goes than just guys just moving around all the time.
Well, that's the one thing you get to see for Clemson. And a lot of people don't like Dabo, but a lot of people do in here and elsewhere complain about the transfer portal and that players are all over the place and there's no loyalty. But that's the one program in the country that nobody's leaving, nobody's coming in. They are completely doing this with recruiting from the high school ranks, and it's kind of astounding. And then the thing about Klubnik for me is that because of the lack of use of the transfer portal, my thought is if this was anywhere else of the ilk of Clemson and they would make a change if Klubnik was not the guy. They would go out in the transfer portal and look for somebody. If this was anywhere else, like Ohio State, people questioning what they did and that they didn't go get anyone. And is either one of these two guys going to be the answer? Well, my thought is that Ohio State would do something about it, a la Alabama. But Clemson, they don't go and get anyone. So I got to think that Cade Klubnik's going to turn out to be a decent quarterback, I guess. But at the same time, DJ wasn't the last 2 years.
I feel like they're trying to make DJ play like Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. And he's a talented quarterback, but he's not at that level.
Yeah, he's Kelly Bryant.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a little harsh. Okay. Well, we'll see what Jonathan Smith can do.
I don't know that Kelly Bryant did not have a better season in 2017 than either DJ's season.
I mean, that's a fair point, but yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to. I don't know what's going to go on with BC as well. I mean, I know they're Sneezer team, but like when I first started watching, like they were up there, and now I don't know. I feel like this haven't gone together, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't know if their school cares that much about football. Unfortunately, that might work.
Doesn't seem like it. No. Now, at least Emmett Moorhead, their new quarterback, came in against NC State and pulled off a upset win and showed a little life there. But, yeah, should be a rough go for BC. At least they've got a lot of winnable non-conference games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, one more thing before I leave, Mark. What do you think of – are you going to watch the Swamp Kings documentary? I know this is an ACC. But I
was not planning on it.
Oh, I don't know. I was excited to watch it. I'll probably watch it sometime soon.
If I get good reviews, you let me know what you think.
Right.
And,
I know the Johnny one wasn't that good. I didn't watch it, but
I didn't see that either.
All right. Well, excited for the season. Are you going to do more of these, Mark?
Yeah, we're going to do each conference. We're going to go through every conference every night. Big 12 tomorrow night, SEC, Big 10 Friday. Yes.
All right, cool. I'll
Thanks,
check it
Will.
out. Thanks, Mark.
Have a good one. Let's keep it working here at the Voice of College Football. We got our guy Anthony on the line. Anthony, what's going on?
Hi, Mark. How are you? It's been a while. How are you today?
I am doing just fine. It has been a while. How have you been?
I'm doing well. Spending time with family. You know, family's important. So,
Absolutely.
Mark, with the ACC specifically, my mistake. This is how I see it playing out. I think it's still Clemson at the top. They're still the team, even though they don't have a quarterback. They're still the team to beat because of the consistency of winning the championships. Then I would say maybe Florida State, but they're still rebuilding like the Hurricanes. So tied at number 2 is Miami and Florida State. We're going to end with the same record and stuff like that. Is that even possible for two teams in the same conference to end with the same record and be competing for at large? Are we getting the playoff this season or the following season?
Well, let's back up on something. First of all, yes, it's possible for two teams in the same conference to have the same record. It happens pretty much in every conference every year. So that is possible. Number 2 would be, are you talking about the 12-team playoff that starts in 2024?
Okay, so not this season, but the following season.
Correct.
Okay. If let's say Miami and Florida State end with double-digit wins, and another team, let's say from the SEC, ends with the same record. But one team, there's no other team that win. Does the Big 12 still get a shot at the playoff if they win, or no? If they win, whoever wins their conference, even if it's like a 9-3 record, or do they do the selection for the playoff based on record?
Are you talking about the playoff that starts in 2024?
No,
or are you
this
talking
year.
about that
This
season?
year.
This year. Okay.
The college football playoff. Let's say Miami, Florida State, and Michigan end with the same record in the but Ohio State wins, Clemson wins, and let's say Baylor wins, but they're on a 9-3 record. Do they still, even though they have a 9-3 record and there's other teams below them that didn't win their conference but have a better record, do they still get a chance to get in before those teams that have a better record than them, even though they have a 9-3 record because they won their conference?
The short answer
like
is
that?
no. 2 teams made the playoffs last year that did not win a conference. 2 teams made the playoffs the previous season that did not win a major conference.
No, but they had double-digit wins, I thought. Most of those teams had double-digit wins.
Everybody's had double-digit wins that's ever made the playoffs.
So that's why I'm asking, do teams like Miami, Michigan, and Florida State, would they get a higher chance according to the committee because of how many wins they have over the conference champion in a Baylor who's 9-3? That's what I'm asking.
The committee has, in a sense, the same criteria it's always had, even though it tends to emphasize and de-emphasize different points each year. The committee ranks the teams each week, and they rank them. Let's put it this way. There's been 9 years of the playoffs, and the committee has never gone out of order of taking the teams with the best record. Meaning there has never been a team that has been selected for the college football playoff that had a worse record than anybody that did not make the playoff. Do you follow me?
Even though that team won the conference. Even though the team won the conference, like I'm using Baylor as an example, if they're 9-3 and they win their conference, do they get a higher chance of getting chosen before 10 and 3 teams like Michigan, Miami, and Florida State? That's what I'm
Nobody's
asking.
made the playoffs with 2 losses, let alone 3 losses.
Huh?
No one has ever made the playoffs with 2 losses, let alone 3 losses.
So teams have to go undefeated, you think?
No, they don't have to go undefeated. A lot of teams lose a game and make the playoffs.
But
I
it's
guess
rare
I'm
that
not
you see
understanding your question. The committee selects what they believe are the 4 best teams in the country, and winning record. The record itself has a lot to do with that. And conference championships and strength of schedule and the nature and performance of the wins and the losses.
Okay. Oh, my mistake. It wouldn't be 10-2. It would be 11-1 for both Miami and Florida State because they would only lose to Florida State would lose to Miami, but Miami would lose to Clemson. How does that work out? Like, how would that work out if let's say Miami loses to Clemson in the ACC championship, but the game is close? Do they look at for the team who's 11-1, even though Clemson is undefeated? Do they look at the criteria how close the game was?
Sure. So in your scenario, Clemson has defeated Miami in the ACC championship game, and you want to know if Miami is going to make the playoff.
Yeah, would Miami and who would get in to the into the playoff, Miami or Florida State, if they end with the same record?
Well, they wouldn't have the same record because you just said Miami made the ACC championship game and Florida State did not.
No, they would be 11-1 because both of them would be 11-1.
Okay. But you just said one of them, Miami, is going to the ACC championship game. Therefore, they're not going to be finishing 11-1. They're going to be 12-1 or 11-2.
Okay, what I made a mistake. And yeah, you're right. 12-1. They would be 12-1 and stuff like that. So, then. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to figure out how to ask my question. So confusing. Well, so the record. What is the criteria for the selection committee besides record and stuff like that in conference champion? What are the other criterias for the selection committee for the playoff? Mark, do you know?
Win-loss record, conference championship, strength of schedule, performance in wins, performance in losses. Meaning, for example, to give you an example, Ohio State lost a very bad game performance against Purdue by 4 touchdowns in 2018. That eliminated them from the playoffs in the sight of the committee.
Okay. How about the Michigan versus Ohio State game? Based on that performance, if let's say Michigan won the game, would Ohio State have gotten into the playoff based off that conference championship performance, or because of the score that it ended with, it wouldn't? Ohio State would have been eliminated. You think?
You're talking about last year's scenario?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Ohio State was not eliminated, even though they got blown out by Michigan in the fourth quarter. Then there's one simple reason why not. Because they had the best record of any team in the country.
Even though Michigan beat them in the conference championship.
That was not the conference championship.
I thought Michigan won the Big Ten last year.
They did, but they did not play Ohio State in the conference championship game. The reason Ohio State made the playoff was they had a better record than anybody in the country.
Oh, okay.
Outside of the 3 teams that made the playoff.
Okay. Is there one player in the ACC that, in your honest opinion, you think has the highest chance to win, have good odds to win the Heisman Trophy?
Drake May.
Besides Drake, there's nobody else, you think?
Well, of course there are. Drake May has the best chance to win the Heisman Trophy because the offense rests on his shoulders, and he's coming off a season in which he scored 45 touchdowns. So he's going to amass incredible statistics. Now, I would think that Jordan Travis, the Florida State quarterback, would also have a good shot at a Heisman Trophy because even though his stats probably will not be in the same range, Florida State's a better team than North Carolina. And if Florida State does something special, like goes to the college football playoff, and Jordan Travis has another great season like he did last year, 24 touchdowns, 5 picks, probably ran for 12 or 13 touchdowns, then he's going to get a lot of attention.
Okay, let's. I'm going to use Van Dyke, Tyler Van Dyke. Let's say
Yes.
Miami makes it to the playoff, but it's not based off Tyler Van Dyke's performance. He's okay with the stats, but the team makes the playoff.
Okay.
Would he have a higher chance? Is the Heisman Trophy based off stats or based off the performance of the team?
Well, Anthony, first of all, we would all be stunned if Miami made the playoff. Number one. Number two, if Miami makes the playoff, believe me, they will need a monstrous season from Tyler Van Dyke. So I cannot dream up any scenario in which Miami will make the playoff and Tyler Van Dyke will have a marginal season.
No, I'm not saying marginal. I'm saying maybe top tier, like top tier, but not like the elite where he leads in every stat for the quarterback position.
So you're asking me what the Heisman voters look for?
Yeah. No. Yeah. You know how the MVP award in the NFL, they do it based off the sometimes they base it off the team's performance in the playoffs and in the regular season and how important the player is to that team instead of the stats. Does the Heisman do the same, have that same criteria or no?
Okay, well, let's understand this first of all, Anthony. No player has ever won an MVP award in the NFL that did not have outstanding statistics.
No, I understand they didn't have. What I'm saying is usually the main they look at the stats, but what I'm saying is the MVP voters usually the main criteria is how important the player is to that team and stuff like that, not the stats. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking. Does the Heisman voters are the Heisman voters kind of like the MVP voters where it's like that too, or no?
Okay. Well, there's certain description and criteria for each award, but do the voters actually adhere to that criteria?
Yes. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
That's debatable. The Heisman Trophy is supposed to go to the most outstanding player in America. But know
it's become a quarterback position, a quarterback award, though.
It is a quarterback or a running back, used to be running back, now quarterback award. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the last person that was non-quarterback or running back was it Desmond Howard or Charles Woodson? I can't remember.
Well, Charles Woodson is the only defensive player to win it, and Desmond Howard was the last wide receiver. Well, no, Devontae Smith won it in 2020. So there's
in general, when you look at the track record of that trophy, it's quarterback or running back.
In general, forever throughout the history of college football, since the first Heisman was awarded in 1935, it's gone to running backs because it was a running game up until there was a transition in the 90s, 2000s, and then it switched to quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. What team in the ACC? For me, the team that I'm looking to make, that's not the Hurricanes that I want to see make improvements, but I don't think it's realistic. Maybe Boston College, but they don't have the talent just yet. I want to see a marginal improvement with them. And I think what I mean by marginal, I think the record I want to see out of them, maybe 7-8, 7 wins, 8-7 or whatever.
Yeah.
Would that be a marginal improvement in your honest opinion for Boston College, or do you think that's not even an improvement for them?
Oh, that would be a huge improvement. They went 3-9 last year. Yeah, if Boston College went 7-5 this year, that would be a huge improvement. I don't see it, but
no, 6-6. My mistake. 6-6.
Okay. All right, Anthony. Well, thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Have a good day, Mark.
To hear from you. Have a good night. All right, folks. Appreciate you all being here for our ACC predictions. Again, we'll be back tomorrow night for the Big 12, the SEC on Thursday, then the Big 10 on Friday. Then we'll wrap it all up sometime either extending on Friday with the conference championship games in the playoff, and we'll throw it all together and give our national championship game prediction. Would like to go back. I think I'll do that tonight. I'll dig up last year's, the year before, whenever we started to post these, and see, and I will report back to all of you what my playoff predictions have been. They were not pretty last year. They were not pretty. The 3 and 4 seeds were not pretty. I did pick Georgia to beat Ohio State in the national championship game. But the other 2 schools, i.e., well, one of them wasn't too bad, considering Utah won the Pac-12 championship. They weren't close to a playoff spot because of early losses, but they did win the Pac-12. So that wasn't too far off. But my other selection, I have no idea what I was smoking that night. I have no idea. I have no idea what I was. Yeah, I have no idea. I was predicting a 2-loss regular season and then into the playoff. Yeah. So anyway, yes. Previous seasons, we'll have to look those up. And we also got a request this week from David Greenshield to post our predictions through the years. So I'll put up my prediction record through the years because you want to join us on Patreon. Patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. And I do such a bad job of promotion here. We've been on for 2 hours and 15 minutes and no promotion here. Patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. And if you're on Patreon or if you're on YouTube and I'll have to figure out how to get you the predictions, I'll just give you a Discord link or something if you're a YouTube member to get my predictions every week. And the predictions from a media panel, if we're going to do that again this year, because I got to tell you, it's a pain in the rear end to round up like 15 media people and get their predictions every week. Also, we've got an SEC channel, Voice of College Football SEC. Please subscribe. Even if you hate the SEC, if you despise the SEC, please subscribe to our channel. If you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, because it all works together, and we really would like this SEC and Big 12 channels to succeed. Also, folks, listen up. We had an interview today with Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. He has proposed NIL legislation with Tommy Tuberville, former Auburn, Ole Miss, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech coach, who's now a senator in Alabama. So Tommy Tuberville and Joe Manchin have proposed legislation concerning NIL. And so I interviewed Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, today. Please look out for that video. We are going to post that Thursday at 6 Eastern. All right, folks. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Again, the SEC channel. We need subs. Get us to 1,000. The Big 12 as well. We've got a really good Big 12 show headed your way. We will have more on that coming soon. And in the meanwhile, enjoy your freedom before it's college football, and you will be tied to college football information and viewing college football all the time, nonstop, from the beginning of September through the end of the year. So enjoy the sunshine before you lock yourself in your basement for the rest of the year. So enjoy that for the next 10 days. We'll be here with Notre Dame Navy post-game, and we'll be here with USC San Jose State post-game, courtesy Tim, Rick, and Tony, of course, on the USC channel after the Trojans win, upset loss against San Jose State. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. We will see you on Wednesday.